Sean, can I say Sean Connely?
Listen, I got that my entire life.
Did you
really?
really?
Every single teacher I ever had, they're calling out attendance, and it's Sean Connely. Oh, that sounds like Sean Connery. I'm like,
I'm a big fan. So if I can extend the notoriety of Sean Connery, then
I'll take it.
Okay, cool.
Absolutely.
All right, second time back in Youngstown Studio.
Second time.
You were here with the MLO Bros the other day, and I was in the back room while you guys were talking. And
I heard you seething a little bit as I was saying some things.
Screaming at the screen.
Hey, that's fair.
So we deserve to sit down and be able to talk about it. So first, before we get into that, why don't you tell viewers what you're doing, and you're running for the 6th district?
Yep. Yeah, so
I'm going to be a senator, so go ahead.
Congressman, but yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no, you're right. Not Senate, But yeah, so my name's Sean Connely. I own a tattoo studio in Canfield, Ohio. I just kind of refuse to accept that this is the path that our government has laid out for us. I think that we can do better. So I decided to throw my name into the race and run for Congress in the 6th district here in Ohio.
So what led you to want to be involved in politics? I would never wish that upon my worst enemy. So it's brutal.
It's absolutely, I never had the idea in my head of, oh, maybe politics is something I want to get into. It's something that has come from just, I guess it's something that's come over the course of my lifetime, but it's been especially just prevalent lately. And like I said, I just really, I refuse to accept that this is the path that we're given. We grew up here. We grew up in America. We were sold a promise. I don't believe that promise is attainable anymore. And I would like to figure out how we can make that attainable again. So,
well, the founders had in mind people like you to be able to say, all right, well, I'm out there doing business. I have ideas. I'm going to bring my expertise and my perspective into government. And you are the bigger idea than it is professional politicians. Now, do you have reservations that you're a regular guy going there and there are professional politicians that are part of the machine that are up against you?
So I would say that yes, obviously. I'm trying to think how to word this. So I'm also new to this, so I'm not,
no, it's all good.
Public speaking, all of that. I'm learning that. I already feel more comfortable though doing it the second time around. So anyway, so yes, obviously, I'd be going up against people that are career politicians that do this. I think that there's benefit in not growing up, or not even growing up, but not building a career in that game. I'm coming at it with one simple task: do better for the constituents in Ohio's 6th district, and to a larger extent the state, larger extent the country. So to not get bogged down in those games, to just kind of cut through the bullshit a little bit of it. And I do think that, like I said last time, I'm not the only one that's running in this country with this mindset. There's campaigns that have popped up all over the country. I do think you're going to see a lot of those people get elected into Congress and just any, other seat that they're trying to run for, that will start to kind of take that old model of the political game and shift the narrative into how can we just simply do better. So the prototype of Tim Ryan, are you familiar with what his run up? No, honestly, it probably sounds bad. Not really. I mean, okay. I know of him. I know who he is. I know he's a Democrat. I don't know too much about him. That was, he was congressman before, when I was younger and not really paying attention. But he reminds me a lot of you. Okay. So idealist, a lot of popularity because he was a rage against the machine kind of guy. Like, I'm going to make big changes. I'm going to push up against the status quo. So he had me, right? Okay. And I was excited. The dude did great campaigning effort, had great popular appeal. And I had an opportunity to interview him. Okay. Before he was elected, after he got elected, and then knee deep into his term. And that dude changed more than anybody that I've ever seen. And yes, part of it was a disappointment because once he got in there, he kind of saw how the machine worked, and
He was like, okay, well, either I'm going to be ineffective pushing against the status quo, or I'm going to play the machine, join the committees, have some power, and then be able to wield something.
Yeah.
And he lost it for me when he just became sort of an extension of the powerful people in Congress.
Yeah.
And totally went against all the grain that he put in front of me that allowed me to vote.
What he ran on. Yeah.
So if you find yourself running on those ideals and then find out that they're not going anywhere, are you willing to just join the power structure or push against them?
So, like I stated, that I'm not the only one doing this. So I do think that the circumstances would necessarily be different. I think that there's a lot more people that are ready to kind of make this change, because obviously I'm just one person running for one of 435 seats. On my own, obviously I can't make that amount of change that I think that we need. I think with the amount of people that I really do believe are going to be elected, I think that would be a sizable enough coalition to kind of change the playbook on how things are done. And if ultimately me fighting for these ideals that I hold, I become ineffective. You brought up Garfield earlier.
Yeah.
I watched I enjoyed that, the Netflix whatever show that it was, and he said something about like, I'd rather lose with you than win being against you. And I don't know, I feel like that kind of resonates. I hold these ideals, I hold them, close to myself. That's what I'm fighting for. If ultimately I don't get anywhere within the machine, that's one thing, but I do believe in the hope that there are enough people wanting the change within the machine that I will be able to be a part of that group that is doing that change.
Okay. And are you, how are you like preparing your family and your friends to go into a campaign that, campaigning is a brutal sport?
No. Yeah, no, it absolutely is. I kind of just dropped it on them, honestly. I took advantage of that. Absolutely. The advantage that they're my friends and they care about me, so they're going to be supportive of me. I've definitely gotten not pushback, but they are just as aware of what campaigning, looks like as I am. And they believe in me. They believe in what I am running on. And so that's kind of good enough for them. For me, obviously, it's terrifying. But again, this is terrifying. You know what I mean? This whole thing. Right. Dude, I've never been one to post a video of myself. You know what I mean? Like, I don't take pictures of myself. So fighting for my ideals is the easy part. Getting in front of a camera and, saying it is the harder part for me. But so again, just I hold these ideals strong. They believe in me. They support me. That's kind of where I'm at with it.
But politics is brutal because it becomes personal, where your character and you're a nice guy running around, you believe in certain things, and you'd really just wish to have your ideas speak for themselves. But then when somebody starts gunning for you personally, like, I know my wife would turn white and say, "No, don't do this. It's not worth the cost."
I definitely had that, and I guess I'm confident in who I am as a person.
Okay.
I'm confident in knowing that I can receive criticism. I can also look objectively at criticism, take myself out of what people are saying about me and see. I feel like I have enough self-awareness to be able to see if people's criticism of me is valid or invalid. If it's valid, I'll take that in consideration. If it's invalid, whatever. People are going to have their opinions, It doesn't necessarily really bother me.
Okay.
So.
All right, let's get to the crux of the debate.
All right.
Both of us are starting point that healthcare is jacked up and broken in ways that are a huge haul for anybody.
Yeah.
So float me your ideas on starting point, not in an idealistic fashion of like, if you hold the scepter and are able to control the gravities of the university. What would you do as a sitting congressman? What could you do to right this, fix this, make ends to make it better?
So I guess first, let me give you my little opening statement speech. Again, I do want to thank you again having me come here. Beautiful studio, and I think that these conversations are absolutely vital that we need to be having. There's a lot of different opinions out there, and like I had stated last time I was on, I do feel like we're at a pivotal turning point, and I think we need to decide where we want to go with some things. And just the simple truth is we pay more than any other country, and we have worse results. There are proven ways to lower costs, proven ways to get better outcomes, and I think we can get to a place where we can get a better return on our investment. On some of the ways that looks like, my big thing is a single payer structure. When you simplify things, you take out things like administrative costs that we pay a lot for, which is billions of dollars. When you're able to more effectively use that money into benefiting the care a patient receives, I think that's more useful in our healthcare system than it going to the bureaucracy of it. So.
Okay. So like me as a taxpayer, like I'm willing, like, because I know we all like, we see the problems that are happening, to inflict a sort of like a national option rather than a model that you can put somewhere, prove it out that you can control costs, have it separate, and then inflict it on the rest of the country, and sort of prove that there aren't going to be these repercussions that all of us as taxpayers are afraid of.
So we already have, so there's a few things that we can look at. We can look at, again, other countries. We're the only country in the world that doesn't have, only peer country in the world that doesn't have a healthcare system that covers everybody. We can look at places like, I think it's Massachusetts, who has a near universal care, and they, against all metrics, rank fairly high compared to other states. We can also look at things like Medicare that we already have in place that has a good approval rating from the people that are enrolled in it. And again, on things like administrative costs, Medicare is around 2%. The private insurance game is about 18 to 20%. So again, that equals billions of dollars. So billions of dollars are able to go into our Medicare system that are able to better give patients care, versus the HR departments, the admin departments that hospitals have to hire just to navigate the bureaucracy of the for-profit private insurance companies.
Okay, so as a taxpayer, these are going to be my wish list of things that you're free to fix the problem as long as you don't do this to me. So I want to see how you respond to this. So number one, in those systems like Medicare, Medicaid, and private insurance, the costs that, sort of like infinitely increase over time because there's no market pressures to be able to keep them contained.
Okay. So you're talking about like the free market and how it relates to the healthcare
competition
system.
Makes prices regulate to a point where you're at a value that consumers are willing to pay. When you put it into a system that are free from those market forces, it basically escalates infinitely.
So I would say a couple things on that front. One, I believe the free market is good for a lot of things. For healthcare, I don't think the free market is the solution. I feel like that's backed up by the fact that we have a free market system here, and we have lower life expectancy. We have higher infant mortality. We have higher maternal mortality rates. We have higher, unnecessarily or avoidable deaths when it comes to healthcare. So in terms of, I guess I'm trying to figure out exactly how you're coming at this.
Well, you can take Obamacare as an example of where you usually you use taxpayer subsidies to be able to prop up the difference between what taxpayer was responsible and what the person that received the services are through.
Yeah. And
it caused an increase in rates and require more subsidies because the providers of the service aren't bringing their costs down. They have no reason to, because if it's just a grant from the government to be able to provide a portion of the healthcare, there's nothing stopping them just to infinitely raising those prices because the taxpayer's going to cover the difference.
And I think that kind of leads into the complexity of the system that we have now, where we do have a public system, Medicare, Medicaid, the VA, and then we also have a private system. And there's a lot of regulation on the patients rather than regulation on pricing. I think when you have stronger bargaining power that you would receive from something like a single payer plan, like many other countries have, you'd be able to set those prices more accurately, more fairly. And you wouldn't have these wide-ranging, volatile prices between, neighboring hospitals. I think it just would simplify everything. It's just one kind of set rules across the board, one set of payments for things. And when you have industry experts that are at the helm of that, kind of determining those things, I think that is where you just get a better overall system.
Well, if we're arbitrarily setting the costs, who are we sort of like designating the noble arbiter that's going to find what's fair? When they're, in the market, you have two warring companies that are trying to attract customers based on price. And if one lowers their price, then the other one has to figure out how to make the product better at a lower cost in order to compete with that other parts. If you keep those gravities away from healthcare, what is going, I'm a guy that's in control of it. And an MRI costs $1,000. And I've got influence from the people who want to sell the service that make more of the subsidy built into that cost of service. There's no market forces. Like, a customer doesn't care if it's being provided by the government to lower the cost to $800. So how do you make it so that it doesn't spiral upward, where depending on, because my taxes are going to be 80% by the time things get, because nothing's going to stop the cost from rising.
So on the basis of taxes, actually, it's funny. We pay more already through our taxes for our public system than any other country. So we're already paying for a public system that only gives it to however many people are on Medicare, Medicaid. I believe it's almost like 50% in this country that are on some type of public funding thing. So you look at other countries, they have this figured out. How to determine prices, I would believe that comes from somewhere from, again, industry experts, healthcare professionals, doctors. I believe that they are the ones that would be equipped to answer that question. A tattoo artist from Ohio, I don't believe is. Where I believe that I can, kind of help this is just saying there is a better way. Other countries have figured that out. We run it in an ineffective way where we pay more, we receive less. There's a better system out there. The nitty gritty of that system, I'm not going to be able to tell you. I have my research in the broader overview of things, but it's obviously something that's very complex and needs true experts in answering those types of questions.
So I'm kind of with you that I think the inevitability is that healthcare is going to be, commandeered service of the government. I think that's just
so. I want to push back on that too. I'm not saying I want a government-run healthcare system. I'm saying I want a government-run financing system. Hospitals, doctors, that's all a private thing. What I'm saying under a single payer system is when those doctors perform a service, they render care, that bill is picked up. It's raising the bottom floor to a new standard of care for Americans. So the common, kind of pushbacks on what a government-run system is, I think those get conflated with what I'm kind of proposing, because you don't have that. You still have the private entity driving that. It's just making sure that private entity's bill is paid for. And again, other countries have already figured this out. So it's not like this is some grand thing that's we're the first ones going to be doing it and having to test it out and figure it out. We just look to other countries, look and see what's worked there. We listen to, again, industry experts, healthcare professionals, doctors, and We figure out who's in charge to best guide the ship on delivering Americans a new standard of care.
So let me give you the typical pushbacks on that. Is
Mhm.
number one, the countries that have single payer still have a dependency on a free market system in order to do innovations. You go to school, you spend a lot of money to get there, you become really good in your field, and then the profit incentive to be able to make money off of what you went to school for. If you disincentivize that by lowering the rate that those people can make over the course of their career by making it government run rather than private run, you're going to have far less good people getting into a field when there's less incentive to be able to do that. The second is a lot of the countries, pharmaceuticals are in the same band where innovations in pharmaceuticals happen because they can make a crap ton of money. When you have a government capping what pharmaceutical companies can make, you either have there's not a reason to make a new drug because there's no money to be made there, or that it is subsidized where the taxpayers just get hammered. So when somebody in Canada is waiting on a specialization that Canada is not creating on their own, they come to the United States to hit that specialty. So when the United States isn't doing all of that, there has to be another in the United States that is free market that makes those drugs and make those specializations.
So, okay, so there's a few fronts there that I want to address.
Sure.
One, if there was an incentive to, okay, let me back up. Other countries, their doctors, when you look at the median range of salaries, they're comparable to the US. So to say that a doctor here is going to make more money here because we have a free market system, you would see doctors in other countries not make anywhere near it. They're comparable. So on that front, I think that, yeah, maybe you'll see some cut at the very top earners. But again, I feel like it's just a matter of shifting money around. It's so, okay, you see a shift, you see a pay cut at the top. Well, now that person also, that doctor also, they don't have their own healthcare costs. They, you take those out of the equation. The other front that I would say is to think that the world isn't also contributing to medical innovation. Again, so we're not the only ones innovating. You know what I mean? Let's see. Okay, so the United Kingdom, what is this? 500,000 people with genetic and health data-driven research on heart disease. So they're a leader in data on heart disease. We take that here in the US because we all kind of share this information. And we, yes, turn it into good healthcare. But to think that we're the only ones that are contributing to that, I think that's
from a theoretical level. If you're starting a company that's creating pharmaceuticals, do you want to, if you generate it, your customer is going to be the people who are going to pay you the most for that drug. Would you pick the one that's capped off that are going to limit your profit, or are you going to pick the countries that are free market and can pay for the innovation?
We already pay in taxpayers' money towards those drugs a lot through the NIH. A lot of taxpayer-funded research gets used in developing those drugs. So taxpayers basically start the race. You know what I mean? They put X amount of money into the science, figuring out the science, and then a third-party company comes in, takes that research, develops a drug, and then turns around and sells it back to us. I guess just my complaint with that is we put the money up, and we don't see that in any type of benefit. We don't have any type of return on that. We're just then allowing another company to come in, take that research, add a little bit more to it. So I'm not saying that these companies don't add their worth to it, but to turn around and then make a profit that just goes towards shareholders, I think that we already see that we have the need to research these drugs. We put the money in to research these drugs. I don't believe that the answer is someone coming in and figuring out how they can extract the most profit from that.
Well, and that's the thing. Like, if you if you don't have, okay, so let's just say we have, I want to develop a new drug, and the United States is my marketplace, and they're going to give me 10 years to be able to make back the money. Maybe I develop 20 drugs. One of them actually makes it to the marketplace. All of my research and development that has to be paid for what I can sell it to, and then it gets offloaded. We start selling it into countries that have capped ability, right? There has to be a marketplace that is dense as the United States in order to pay that drug, or else I'm not going to develop 20 drugs. I'm not even going to try if I know that I can't recoup my losses from developing those drugs for the next 10 years. When you change that metric, like who's going to develop a drug that you can't make or figure out a way to make money on?
I mean, pharmaceutical companies are posting record profits.
Oh, I'm not arguing.
So I'm just saying, I guess I just don't understand. I don't know. I do understand the premise, but I guess I just disagree with the fact that, again, we're already funding this research. I think that we don't need to just, I don't know, with pharmaceuticals posting record profits, they obviously have figured out how to profit on that. Do we concentrate that wealth into a few people by exploiting the need for medications on our citizens? I think that the better answer would just be, how about we regulate the price of those things. And so now that company, it's that company's personal responsibility to figure out, how do I now operate in this system where I'm not able to exploit it? And I think that there's still a lot of money to be made in that system. And if that just means a few billions aren't added to some shareholders, I don't see the problem with that.
Well, if I'm right, and you basically take the incentive out of the system where there isn't a great motivation to make new stuff, you're just basically going to use what's on the market right now, and then it's just going to make profit on what's already circulating.
To say that there's no incentive, again, I think falls back into saying that the rest of the world doesn't innovate, which they do in many different ways, many different pharmaceutical ways, many different
Why do they do it though?
Because the drive to innovate. I think that it kind of boils down to to think that healthcare professionals are only getting into it because of the money, because they want to make money. I think that obviously money is an incentive, but I would argue that a lot of these people get into these professions because they just truly want to help people. They want to care for people. They want to care for their patients. I think that there's enough money that leaves incentive there. You can still make money off these things, but I think that it's more so of capping the amount of money that you can make off of things like healthcare.
Yeah, and I don't disagree with you. Yeah. I think any regulated system is going to have the people that take advantage of the system to become wealthy. But I also know that there has to be profit incentive and I disagree, but agree with you. I wish that there were a bunch of monks that only produce drugs based on how it's going to help communities rather than the money that's going to go to shareholders and whatnot. I think it's more of the latter, that profit is really the only thing that makes drugs develop. I can't think of anything. I know there are good people out there, but I don't think the machine is fueled only by great intentions.
Again, I feel like that really just goes back to the ways that other nations are contributing. I guess don't quote me on this. I saw something. I think it said the U.S. is about 30% of like the total amount of money that goes into R&D for medical advancements. So again, don't quote me on that, but let's take that premise. We obviously don't make up the whole amount of research and development. Other countries are contributing to that. They don't have these for-profit models, yet they're still contributing. They're still innovating. I don't think that America is any unique thing in being necessarily better in those fields than other countries. So I guess I just disagree that the profit is the only incentive or the best incentive. Again, because if profit was the best incentive, you would see things like the U.S. having a higher life expectancy, lower infant mortality rates, and lower maternal mortality rates.
Well, I guess the long and short is that if there are like, if we do single payer and there's somebody who says this whole idea could wreck everything for everyone, at least let's be sure that before we do that, you're right and I'm wrong, right? Before we make an experiment and make it so that everybody's made worse off by something that had good intentions but didn't have good math on its side.
I feel like the math on its side is every other nation has figured it out. We haven't figured it out. I would argue that we're the ones using the bad math. The good math is the efficient way of running a healthcare system that other nations have already figured out.
Give me one of those nations. Let's find out like how they're different, how they're the same, how it could really be a good model that we could use.
So Germany has a good model. Basically any Nordic country. Australia, Canada has a good model. And that's not to say that any of these models don't have flaws in it. I'm not saying that this is the one true all perfect way, perfect solution. There's absolutely flaws in every system, but I think, again, it's just establishing a standard baseline of care. A baseline of care that doesn't leave 20-some million people uninsured. It doesn't leave the leading cause of bankruptcy being medical debt. And within that bankruptcies, I think it's 80% people that declare bankruptcy because of medical debt have insurance. So again, I just feel like the math really is within those other nations. I don't have the specifics on those other nations off the top of my head, but again, I do feel like it boils down to life expectancy, overall health, among other metrics.
Okay. And so like, again, I agree with you that I think that's the inevitability because it's so broken that I think there's no single thing that's going to fix it. And we're going to head that direction only because there are going to be so many sick people and all of us are going to make sure that people don't get taken care of.
Yeah.
Now, would you be open to like a hybrid model? Okay. So you have the public option where we at least do a standard of care to a certain level. And then anybody that doesn't want to be involved in that, they can say, screw you, I'm a cash payer. I'm going to go out into this private system. And then both are coexist and both are able to see past.
Yes. So I do think that, we have we obviously have a hybrid system now that kind of, obviously there's guardrails in that. I would like to see more of the public option, but yeah, little carve outs to where you can, if you have the money, have the means, pay for better care, or at least, more access to higher level care. But again, I think we can just get a baseline standard of care. People that want to pay extra, you're free to do that. But everybody is covered under the single payer option.
And do you think if we did both of those, we're at 50% of the country that were just doing it privately, they were paying for services rendered, they were doing it their own method, and then you go 10 years, 20 years in the future and you compare the private versus public, what do you expect to see the differences between the two? Which do you think is more successful? The one that is subsidized by government and the services are just taken care of by an entity and everybody else can opt out of that, goes to the private. What do you think the differences would be given enough time?
I mean, I think we already have that data. Again, just compare the US system to other countries. We fall, kind of down in the rankings compared. I do think that it's, nuanced in the way of if we have the overwhelming majority of people on the public system and just a select few that have the means to pay for that higher level of care, I don't know necessarily if those numbers would be comparable. I think that the ways that we would look basically to see if the single payer system was successful again were over those 10 years, how did we improve the average health for Americans? And again, there's many ways to do that. And I believe that you would see that there are benefits to that.
So if you went out right now and went to a doctor and say their first question for you is, what insurance do you have? And you're like, hey, I'm a cash person. And the amount that the cash person is going to pay is significantly less than the person that's putting it through insurance. And So the advantage would be that if I can cut out the bureaucracy of the health system, and I don't have to have an entire floor trying to push, services through an insurance company, that they can compete on another level. I have like 5 or 6 doctors that are clients, and they've opted out of all of the public side of things. There are no Medicare, no Medicaid, no private insurance. They are just on you come in, I write you an invoice, you pay for services, and we do not want anywhere near the other side of healthcare. And so that's a good experiment to be able to say, like, what's the upsides and downsides? I think the public side needs all taxpayers to contribute into it in order to be anything that can mathematically survive. So giving people the chance to opt out of it is going to kill the financing, right, for that. Because if I'm over here paying 30% in taxes and I'm over here paying 70% in taxes, scarcity of services and waiting on procedures and all of that kind of stuff, like, I'm not going to feel like I'm getting great value because my healthcare is going to cost so much more than the market forced private version.
So you're saying that you need everybody to obviously pay for the single payer option. Yes. And then if somebody wants to opt out of that, well, not opt out, I guess, wants to get additional coverage on top of that.
No, they opt out. No, I don't want to pay
so I'm not suggesting an opting out version. I'm suggesting if you want to buy a separate plan on top of what you're required to pay through taxes, that's on you. You're allowed to do that. If you don't have the means to do that, well, you still have a baseline standard of care that is good for everybody. And I feel like that still just leads into the fact that, doctors make the same essentially salaries everywhere. So I don't think it's a thing of reducing our quality of care. I think, again, it's just raising the bar for the bottom.
And that model is sort of like the Social Security model, right? We're going to force you to pay into a system, and we're not going to give you a chance to opt out and go find an investment that's better than insurance, right? Yeah. And if you gave someone that option, how many people would say in 2 seconds, once they did the math on it, says, I don't want anywhere near Social Security, terrible insurance, terrible investment, I'm going private, and you can have your experiment over here, but I don't want my money anywhere near it. If it can't survive the opt-out, I don't think it's a great idea.
So do we get to opt out of our taxes that paid for our police or our fire, services? I think that it's just shifting the perspective into looking at it as necessary infrastructure within our society. I think healthcare is necessary infrastructure. I say, how do you have a thriving economy? You have healthy, educated population. How do we make our population healthy? Well, other countries have already done it. They can compare the records. A single payer healthcare system makes your population healthy. So there, like I said, there's a lot of nitty gritty things that you can get down to that I personally am not going to be really qualified to speak on.
Right.
I can relay information about the statistics and things like that. There's going to be a lot of things that I don't know. Those are the things that I'm working on figuring out and having a better understanding. And that's where I also believe that, when you have a team and a budget, like in Congress, you're able to have those resources to truly understand things better, to be able to have those more nuanced conversations. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with that one.
Okay. So like we'll use fire, for example. So let's just say you lived in a community that had a terrible fire department. Their reaction time was awful. You didn't agree with it. And you made an agreement with them and said, I'm not going to pay my property taxes that go to fire, right? I'm going to basically take the responsibility on my own. If I ever have to call you, it's going to cost me $1,000. Now you put emphasis on the person that's providing the service to compete to give you good service in order for you to want to pay them. If you let something like government get to the point where it's not accountable to the people who are experiencing the service, and I'm like, hey, I went to this healthcare and I waited 8 hours in a waiting room because there's no incentive to see me quickly. How quickly is that kind of person buy out and say, no, I'm going to take the competing doctor and the competing waiting room that says, I'm going to see you in 20 minutes or your money back, and not see healthcare get even worse on the service end compared to private?
So I'm just going to be honest with you. I feel as if that's a straw man argument that really gets so far away from what I'm talking about. Maybe that was my fault for bringing up fire and police, but it's more so just to say that, again, this is necessary infrastructure that we need. It benefits everybody like the police and fire do. You don't get to opt out of paying your taxes that go towards those services. I don't think that you would be able to, I don't think you should be able to opt out in paying taxes that goes towards the healthcare of this nation. I think that, again, other countries have shown that they innovate as well. They have doctors that make good salaries, comparable salaries, and they have the results to show for it. So my really main argument is America is the only one that has this system in place. Every other country that has implemented a universal single payer Medicare for all styled thing, none of them have gone back on that. So I think that just kind of says, although there's flaws within these systems, the benefits outweigh those flaws. And I believe that here in America, I don't know, we're pretty awesome. And I think that we could even cut down on those flaws. I think that we have the people here that are smart enough to figure out how to make those systems run even more efficiently than they do in other countries. I think that a lot of the pushback on this is because it's a big change. It's scary. There's comfort in normalness. So this is absolutely something that would take big change. There's a lot of questions to be answered, things that we need to figure out. However, I don't know. I don't believe that people in this country shy away from a job just because it's hard. And that's what this job would be. It's hard, but it's something that's achievable. It's something that we can do. And we have a lot of precedent. We're not just going into this blind. We have a lot of kind of guardrails and guidelines that we can follow and figure out how to improve upon. And I believe that here in America, we can do that.
Yeah, and I feel like you're a reasonable guy, and there's probably more we agree on. Yeah. And I do think single payer could work out so long that you don't put yourself in the camp where if you have a concern from someone who you're about to wreck something that they hold dear,
that's
you're like,
fair.
Screw it, and we're doing it anyway, and it's better. Trust me.
Yes, right? I think it's just at this point, it's at least important to be having these conversations. I do think that absolutely this is the direction we need to go. I would almost say that it's imperative. I think that continuing the system that we're doing now, there's a lot of unnecessary suffering in this country that is, the sum of that. But yeah, again, we need to have these conversations. We need to have the experts in these fields, and there's a lot of different experts that all are in that ecosystem in figuring out the best way to do that. Because I think that's kind of where we need to be at is, okay, we need to go towards this system. How do we do that? What do we do that? What does that look like? How do we implement that? How is that, how's the best way to implement that? That's kind of where I feel like we should be at as a country. And,
Yeah. And I don't disagree with that. I think if you get rational minds together and you hear out the other side, I think there's a lot of common ground in what you want to achieve. The means of getting there is more philosophical. And that's what we talked about fire departments, police departments, because on a philosophy standpoint, it's an analog for how you feel about. Let me give you one more of those silly ones. Just see.
I'll try my best. I'll try my best.
Ferret it out with me.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So Sean, you're accused of murder.
Okay? Oh man, it's going to derail this campaign.
Bad optics for being accused of murder.
Yeah.
You have a high price attorney that's going to represent you versus a public defender. You can see where I'm going with this.
Yeah, I remember. I did my research. I watched the rest of the show from last week.
Everybody knows they are not going to choose the public defender. Now let's take. Would you choose a public defender? Let me not make that assumption.
I think so. I feel like this analogy shows that there's a baseline standard of representation that we've given our citizens through a public defender, through public health care. I think that the issues within that system are just more so to do with underfunding. I don't believe that those attorneys are any less capable than a hotshot attorney. I mean, obviously,
but is the consensus of people asked whether or not they want the high dollar person versus the public defender? Yeah. The reason that they are going to pick the high dollar is because they want to win, right? Mm-hmm. And their feeling is that if the person has no incentive, right, to win, they're going to kind of mail it in. They're going to do what's required of them. They might have some, ideals that they're trying to fight for the common good. But what one person is willing to do to go over the top because it's a high paying deal, you expect that when you pay more, you get more. That's just no matter what marketplace you go in. The public
That's
defender,
true for the people that can pay more.
Right.
The average American can't pay more, though. So what do? We raise the standard of the public defender. We figure out a system to elevate the baseline standard of representation that they can give. And we make sure that the average person, not the people that can pay a hotshot attorney, have fair representation. I feel like that parallels what I believe in the public healthcare system.
You can make the public defender better.
Yes, so we can make the public defender. Yes,
the person that's
we all pay for the public defender. If you have the means to pay for more, you're free to do that. But we set the standard for our baseline, and we all pay for that because we all benefit from it. The healthcare system has ripples throughout so many different industries, just things within our society. A hospital in a rural area is a staple of stability. A lot of those are going away. And what's that do? That, mom and pop shops that are next to that provide the lunch for those people, those go away. So, I think that it's not only the moral argument is that we should do this. I do believe that there's the economic argument that when we create a stable system, other industries, other elements are able to feel the stability from that system in very nuanced ways.
We're going to read some comments because there's a ton of them through here. So.
I've been pushing people to...
All right, let's see what people say. This is going back part of our conversation, so I apologize if we have to go back.
No, it's okay. I'll try my... Yeah.
Okay. All right. Not much hope for the Northeast Ohio, but would be refreshing to see Sean win.
Appreciate you, Penny Lane.
First look to California, Massachusetts, Minnesota, states that already have it.
So, that goes back to what I said of, again, we wouldn't be going into this blind. We have a lot of precedent. We have a lot of information to build off of. And again, I think that we have smart people in this country that could do it as long as collectively we agree that that's the direction that we need to be going in. So
every doc takes Medicare. Not all of them. You can opt out, and there are penalties. There's a lot of hell to pay to not take Medicare patients. Your practice has to be completely different. It's all cash basis. So is the same idea as socialized medicine similar to Canada? Do you know much about Canada's system and how it compares to what single payer?
Again, I don't know, I guess if you're getting into finer details, I don't know. Okay. But I do know how they do compare in a lot of ways. The main thing that I hear that I guess I want to address is wait times. I don't know. That's the argument that I always get, at least. Is that something you would agree that you hear a lot when it comes to a single payer?
I used to run a lot of clinics, technical clinics, where I would teach people, computers early on, and I made them free, right? Mm-hmm. And the free clinics that I always ran were absolutely horrendous with how the influx of people, how little they cared, how little they cared to show up. I got swamped and I was overrun, and really I couldn't do much good because of what the response to free was. Devaluing something, making it something you don't have to pay for, means the consumer doesn't take it at all serious. So I can see if I set up a free clinic and let it open to the public, I got a sniffle and there's no reason for me not to go. I'm going to go there, where in other words, in any other circumstance, if it costs me $100, I might not go and swamp that system. So yes, that's definitely a concern.
So when it comes to wait times, most other European countries actually have faster responses to emergency medical care. And that's because of people that have a sniffle going to a primary care doctor, getting preventative care. That sniffle, and I'm not a medical person, so I don't know. But getting that sniffle checked out showed that, there's actually a bigger underlying cause. So even though you thought it's just a sniffle, whatever, I can power through it. Had you not gone, a couple months later, you would have found yourself in a situation where you need to go get emergency care. Now you're going and swamping that system. So again, other countries have a faster wait time. And then when it comes to wait times in terms of elective cares or non-emergency care, other countries might have longer wait times, but we only have short lines for people that can afford to be a part of the line. Our wait times look like skipping it altogether because you can't afford it. So when you take that into account, I would argue that the average wait times are probably pretty equivalent. How do you combat that? I believe instead of doing things like delisting nursing as a professional degree, we do things that incentivize people to get into these fields. We make it easier and less burdensome of student debt. Which obviously gets into a whole other conversation.
We'll do that next time.
Yeah, listen, I'm telling you, I think we can make this almost like a weekly thing. But
would you do a debate with Ruley, by the way, if I called?
Absolutely,
yeah?
Yes.
We'll plan that.
Okay, I will get very prepared for that. That's a big one.
That's way on the horizon.
Yeah, that's way on the horizon.
We're not even in 2026
I do have
yet.
to, I am running in a primary first. So I do, I'm making my case that I'm the best candidate in that one. But all right, God, I got derailed.
I detract.
No, your fault. Where was I at? Oh, incentivizing people to get into these fields. And I think that even lends into competing on the world stage. We want to, again, how do you have a thriving economy? You have healthy and educated citizens. That's incentivized more people to become doctors. It's incentivized more people to become healthcare professionals. When you have a higher demand or higher supply of nurses and doctors, well, you are able to ease the demand and the wait times that go along with that demand. So I just think that there's so many factors that plays into that it benefits us as a country together.
Yeah, and I agree with you that if you had health clinics that were options before someone just went to an emergency room where you're tying up someone with a
preventative
high specialty.
care.
Yeah, yes. Absolutely. And that might be one of those things that we can adopt from all of those other models that say, okay, well, this seems like it's pretty pivotal into making it so that your emergency rooms aren't overrun by those
because
people.
There's so many people nowadays are using the emergency room as their primary care doctor, because when you go to an emergency room, by law, they're required to treat you.
Right.
Without, asking for your insurance first. So, when you aren't able to pay for care, you need care regardless. That's something that our health doesn't discriminate. It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter how healthy you are. You can wake up and a million different variables can happen and you can find yourself needing that health care. Some people are lucky and they don't need it until the end of their life. Some people are unlucky and they need it way earlier. So I think finding ways to ease the stress on the emergency services, there's absolutely a benefit in that.
Do you agree the MAHA movement and making less people sick so they don't need those services?
So I don't know too much about the MAHA movement. I do and I don't. I don't know exactly what they stand for. I just know that they don't like, the stuff in our food that makes us all unhealthy. To tie that back into a single payer healthcare system, when the government's picking up the bill, do you think that those political leaders are going to be incentivized to take money from, the big food monopoly lobbyists that are wanting to just cut their bottom line and put, unhealthy shit in our food? Or are they going to be thinking about, well, we have a budget for our healthcare system. We need to figure out how we're not going to explode that. So I'm going to think twice about allowing private companies to kind of dictate what we get to eat as Americans.
Well, I think they go in parallel because supply demand issue, that if you are struggling and like adding up how many unhealthy people that need health services, and if you can cut down the inflow of people that are coming into a system, as well as then you can extend services to more people because less people actually need those services. So I think those kind of work in tandem. Yeah. If you can figure it out where it's an uncorrupted, interested.
Like I said, I mean, on its basis, obviously I agree with, make America healthy again. Yes, absolutely. I think we need to make America healthy again. I think that comes in ways of regulating what's able to be put in our food, what leads us to be unhealthy. And then you have systems like the healthcare system where we have more access to preventative care. So people that have a sniffle can go and get that checked out and make sure it's not something crazy, because, that takes 10 minutes for a doctor to look at you and say, oh, that's just a cold. Here you go. Be on your way. Or, oh, that's something that needs to be looked into further. So, I think that just building up these systems in this infrastructure are ways that we can just simply better care for our citizens.
Let's read some more comments. Brian says California is just a dumpster fire overall. Did the ACA really work to lower costs, or did the tax subsidies artificially lower the costs?
What I'll say with that, and again, I'm a tattoo artist. I don't know the fine print of the ACA. I will say that just talking to some physicians, the regulation is put on the patient, not so much the private insurance companies themselves. So they're allowed to run rampant while the burden falls on physicians and patients. I don't know if you've had to deal with any medical things.
No.
I have. It's a nightmare. It absolutely is a nightmare. And, when you're sitting there struggling, fighting for your life, what's, adding on bills and then trying to call insurance companies and trying to figure out what they'll pay. And then you have to get prior authorization, which is someone that doesn't have a medical degree determining if the procedure is necessary from someone with a medical degree. So, these things are dumpster fires, but I think it's because we've prioritized where we use the strength of our government in determining what's regulated and what's not regulated, what's allowed to just kind of run rampant, what we don't allow to, go anywhere. So that's,
who I really trust in this conversation? Yeah. Mark Cuban.
Okay.
All right. Entrepreneur, went after pharmaceutical industry, created sort of a new parallel path with off market generic drugs, and has a really good beat. I swear, if I read something, I would trust him more than RFK or anybody else who's involved.
RFK, that's a low bar there.
Another show. That's the fourth show. The reason is I think he has passion about the industry, and he knows a lot about it, and he's a really smart individual.
Yeah.
And so I think, like we were talking about having experts that have a chip on their shoulder about fixing broken systems and not really just falling into line and joining that machine. He's a guy that I would look for to be sort of leading in that.
Okay. And I know Mark Cuban. I don't know too much about him. So listen, on principle, I tend not to agree with just any billionaire. But if he's something that he is very knowledgeable, then sure. Anybody that can add to a conversation that has credibility, the credentials to back it up, I think that, yes, those are people that we should be looking to. Is Mark Cuban one of those people? I don't know.
Look into him a little bit. I think
I'll look into him. I'll look into him. Absolutely.
I think you'll be impressed.
But yeah, I think it's just a matter of listening to the people that have the credentials that back up what they're saying. Simply, I'm trying to push the conversation into the single payer system, and within that conversation, we need those people that have the knowledge to be able to figure out the best way to implement that. So that's
you
where
think it's likely that Medicare just becomes that single payer and it expands?
I mean, I think that could possibly ease the burden of the transition. Yeah, because we already have a system that's in place. You know, we're not building a whole new infrastructure, or at least infrastructure in terms of the system. So yeah, I think that we absolutely could kind of just renovate that system and turn that into our system. Listen, just from purely a messaging standpoint, I don't know why we haven't talked about just naming it AmeriCare. I think that that's great.
Good branding.
Exactly. That's what I thought. So AmeriCare for all. That's my stance.
First legislation will be AmeriCare.
Yeah. There you go.
Let's do it. Let's see. California is far from a dumpster fire. By all measure, it's successful. Yes, indeed.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I don't have the statistics on numbers, but I would say that maybe healthcare system overall dumpster fire. I don't necessarily think that California is a dumpster fire in ways that people talk about it. I think obviously they have flaws and problems, but I would say overall they're doing fairly well on a lot of things. So.
Yeah, and what I think the genius of our country is that we have 50 laboratories that can trial this stuff out, good or bad. And I think
Massachusetts has done it, and
in politics,
they've raised the quality of care for
because if it goes against the grain of your political persuasion, then you're more critical or more complimentary, depending on if it says what you want it to say, rather than it just being a laboratory where we're just feeding the stuff that didn't work and did work and trying to hybridize it and make it into a better system. Yeah. We're incapable of that because of politics.
Do think rhetoric has gone in the way of a lot of innovation. And that's why my whole spiel is it's not left versus right. It's up versus down. I think that obviously in this area, I may turn people off because I have a D next to my name. However, I think the sentiment of disagreeing with somebody based solely on their political party, that's losing its effect on people, because I think we are all kind of waking up and just saying we simply just need something better for us. And that's where I'm running on. That's what I'm trying to deliver.
Who you in the primary with? Do you know anybody that's running?
Yeah, so there's two other people running. I think there might be a third one again. I don't know exactly. I've met them. They're good people. And my whole thing is, I want to see more people run. I'm encouraging people to hop into this race with me, because I think that the more people that run, the better chance we have of actually making change. I believe that I would be able to deliver on those promises, but if you believe that you would be able to deliver on those promises better than I can, absolutely jump into the race, absolutely run. And even if it's not for this seat, run for something else. I think that we the people need to represent we the people. And I think that just means more people getting into these positions of power.
I'm going to have you converted to a libertarian, and even if you don't make the primary, you'll at least run as an independent or libertarian. You're in.
we could look into that. Yeah.
Yes, indeed. At Aetna, determining costs, CMS, expert docs, consent. You're eliminating the middleman that is sucking up all of our money. And that's a Cuban end, describing how the actual transactions happen and how many point to point without a middleman in the middle, somebody siphoning off money along the way.
Well, that goes into the administrative costs. I mean, the middleman, like I said, that 18 to 20%, that equates to billions of dollars, and Medicare does it at 2%. So just your numbers guy, I just feel like right there, that's a compelling argument. And there obviously is better ways to do this and to save billions of dollars on bureaucratic red tape. We should really look into that.
And because there are so many subsidies and there are so many middlemen, it's really tough to get a handle on what your costs are.
You need exactly. Like I said, I think that all just kind of comes back to stability, and stability looks like many different things, and not having to have entire departments just solely focused on navigating that maze that is our system currently. think when we can kind of divert that energy into providing better care for our patients. And again, like I said, I know it's a big change. It's a scary change. And there's a lot of things that we'll need to figure out. I mean, there's a whole 18 to 20% of an industry that we're going to need to figure out what to do with. We can't just say, okay, all this is gone and those workers, tough luck. We need to figure that out. But again, it's just something that I do think that we're capable of doing if we set our perspectives right.
All right. Mass exodus of population, mass exodus of business and manufacturing, spiraling taxes, cost of living double or triple the rest of the country, deficit spending spiraling out of control. Is that success? Let you respond to that.
So I'll be honest, I have ADHD moment. I just completely zoned out. Which one are we? Mass
the
exodus?
Brian one up there. Mass exodus. They're talking about population. California and when tax policy regulation, mass exodus of population moving to Texas, Florida, mass exodus of businesses finding better tax rates in other states, manufacturing spiraling, tax cost of living doubles.
So, I don't want to get necessarily into a subject that I don't feel as if I have a lot of knowledge in. I guess I know that the California has a more progressive tax system. So people at the top pay more than the people at the bottom. So when people say things like, California has such high taxes, okay, high taxes for the people that can afford to pay those taxes or high taxes for the people that can't afford to pay those taxes? In my perspective, it seems like it's the people who can pay those taxes. I think that there's a lot of complexity that goes into shifting populations, and migration throughout the nation. I think that it's just simply very expensive to live in California because it's a prime real estate to live in. Again, I don't want to speak to the reasons why those costs are so high.
They're a good microcosm in the study of when you do this, looking at the effects of having done that. So if you're a regular consumer and you pay more for a service, you have expectations the service is going to be better than people who are paying less, right? So, crime should be less in a state, easy to get into business would be in a state that has high taxes, because services would be better than most states, not worse. And I think why people are rejecting the policies of California is they had an opportunity to make it sort of like, the pinnacle of high taxation equals better services, and they squandered it.
I would disagree that they've squandered it. Again, I don't know the specifics, but I fairly certain that if you look at a lot of the data, it will show where they're excelling in. Crime, for example, I'm pretty sure that they have like a per capita lower crime rate than most other states. They have a larger volume of crime because there's a larger volume of people that live there. So obviously, but when you break it down per capita, you just don't, those numbers don't reflect the narrative of that they, are failing in certain areas. And yeah, I feel like I would just need to be better versed in the specifics of the California economy. I'm under the impression that, again, a lot of the rhetoric is, California is a, hellhole, stuff like that. I don't agree with that. I think that, again, they have problems. I think that they excel in areas that may kind of go under the radar, and areas that, and this goes for any state, we can take a look at different states, see what they do well, study those, figure out why they do well, figure out the nuances that go into that, and figure out how to implement that on a federal level.
Yeah, that's an objective case study where you don't have an end. You're not there to defend or criticize California. Find out what these things and what the repercussions are, what the ripples are, and find out if you were to do this. Let's just say, let's take Oregon and do the same thing in California, and we don't want to. You hit the same pitfalls that they did. How would you change it? What metrics would you change to try to get it solved? And then eventually you get 20 states that all drive different things. And we're like, I see it. That's what makes this thing work.
Exactly.
But when it gets political, then you feel the need to defend California.
Yeah, exactly.
And I feel the need to, defend Texas.
Yeah.
And now we got nothing to talk about.
And because I don't know, I do feel like it's just a thing of there's a lot of conversations that happen with a lot of people that don't know much about it. I'm guilty of it. You know what I mean? I talk to my clients, and then sometimes halfway through, I'm like, actually, I don't know what I'm really talking about.
See, that's important to say you don't know.
Yeah,
I have more
to
respect
recognize
for
that in yourself.
Absolutely.
I think that, yes, that's what we need. Because again, Texas has some things that they do well. California has things that they do well. California has some flaws. Texas has some flaws. Nobody's perfect. I think that this all ties into back again, at least for my argument of a single payer system. Other countries have figured it out. Just like we can look to other states to figure out different things that they do well, we can look at those other countries and figure out how they did it, what they did, how they implemented it, where they succeed, where they have flaws, how we can improve upon those flaws, and how we can, again, just raise the standard care for all of our citizens in America.
All right, let's read the last of our comments.
Right.
We went a long time already here today. I can do this all day. I'm glad to see someone outside of the political bubble trying to run and enter politics to make changes, but all that is being delivered are hopes and dreams, nothing concrete, no substance as to how these changes should be made. It's nothing but other countries and other places. And I'm going to give credit that when you involve people into politics that bring their own ideals to the table, you know that you don't have the luxury of being involved in campaigns and being a professional politician. So there are going to be some blind spots that
no, absolutely,
100%. But the way that you've been frank with me and that we've talked about this, I know you're captured as a Democrat because you have to be in certain ways. But I think you have a reasonable enough mind to be able to hear somebody who disagrees with you and do it civilly and really argue down to the math and what's behind it.
That's why what I said in the beginning, I think that these conversations are vital. I'm not here to just lecture people because, again, I'm a tattoo artist. If you want to talk about the ins and outs of that, I can consider myself an expert. I'm not coming at this as I have all the knowledge. I know where to go. I have the concrete substance. I'm making the case for my morals. I do, these are things that I have looked into. Absolutely. Do I know every single little thing that goes into it? No. But I know that we can do better. There's models out there that show that we can do better. And I think it's just a matter of being a part of the force that shifts the government's perspective or our perspective of our government into figuring those out. I'm not saying that I'm going to be able to do that myself. I'm saying I can be a part of the system that ensures we go and figure that out.
Just ensure me that you're going to be really sure before you hit us with the rest of it, that you're knowing that it's safe and all of my fears aren't going to be realized. Then you're going to have to apologize to me one day. Just assure me of that.
Again, I think that the data from other countries can assure you. I think when you see that we're about 4 years lower on the average life expectancy, let's say we close that gap. Well, there you go. There's a concrete evidence that it has worked. I think when we stop allowing mothers to die during childbirth, that's a concrete evidence of that worked. So I think that you'll see a lot of those metrics start to tick up if we hopefully get to the point where we implement this system.
All right, a couple more here and then we'll wrap it up. Let's see. Penny said there would be more money freed up for incentives without the middleman. Absolutely. There can be profit incentives in single payer. Lynn says it's not an experiment when it exists in most of the country. It still is an experiment because it's not applying to the entire country. The demographics are different. The different diversity of cultures and cities aren't in there, but you can prove it out. Like if I were to take single payer in a rural community with a smaller tax base versus a metropolitan area, I can crunch the numbers and see if with less, revenue from taxes, if I can still pull off the infrastructure that's required for having a single payer. Because if you do something worse in San Francisco and you go to the middle of Montana and say it's for you too, and they just don't have the infrastructure to support that decision, it'll cripple those rural areas.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that's negated by the fact that, we ensure that that infrastructure that's there currently has the money and budget to be able to provide those services to the people within those communities. and we already subsidize healthcare in many different ways. So I think subsidizing a healthcare facility in a rural area that on its own wouldn't be able to make enough to sustain itself. But with the help of the single payer system, that we inject money into that so that they're able to operate and provide those services. Again, I think that just leads into a lot of other economic benefits as well. So.
Okay, Brian says, I do business across the country as well as have many customers in Canada, and those customers have become friends. I have friends that have made in my motorsports career all over the world, but the majority that aren't American.
So I want to address, so Brian's comment, I do business, have you ever looked into the wait times and cost to prop up those systems? In our current system, as long as you pay $10 a month bill, you can't be sent to collections. So again, I feel like and again, I don't know where these questions came in, but I do feel like I addressed the wait times. Our wait times, we just have a different wait time. We just have a wait time of I can't afford it, so I'm not going to go. So we never get put into the queue to measure how long we actually wait. And the cost to prop up those systems, again, we pay nearly twice as much already for our healthcare system as it is compared to our peer nations, while having worse outcomes. So, these other countries have figured out how to pay half as much of us and get a better return on results. Does that mean some Saudi princes maybe not go to their countries for their top level care? Yeah, but I don't know. We're not Saudi princes. We're just the everyday Americans. And so I think it's more beneficial to raise the standard of care the ways that other countries have.
All right, we'll do one more. You pick it out.
Oh, man.
There you go.
Okay.
Whatever you want to respond to there, and then we'll cut it off for today.
Saving lives just for some middleman to get on the phone and tell you your patients don't qualify for their life-saving care because the insurance company doesn't want to pay for it. I mean, yeah, I feel like our system right now, what is an insurance company's motive? To extract the most profit that they can. So what's that going to incentivize them to do? To approve every, request for care or coverage that a doctor is requesting for their patient? Or is it going to develop a system where they can try to get away with denying as many claims as possible? And I'm not saying that there isn't a thing of, well, if you just approve everything, well, then it's just going to, bankrupt or whatever. But again, we spend the money. The money's there.
I've always been curious as to why insurance companies are even involved in this process at all. Like, insurance companies are actuaries. Like, they're taking a liability and the likelihood of something occurring and covering enough in premiums to cover the likelihood that something happens, right?
So a lot of other countries, their healthcare systems started around after World War II. What was happening in America? The fear of socialism and communism. So we looked at a lot of those other countries and we said, that looks too much like socialism. We're not going to do that. So we came up with our own system. 80 years later, I feel like we just kind of see how that system didn't necessarily pan out the best way. I'm not saying that it hasn't led to some innovations. I just think the downfalls of that far outweigh any benefits that we've received.
Well, it becomes socialism if you have an insurance company managing it, that your individual decisions don't increase in your costs. So if I get life insurance and I do dangerous things, I pay more than a person that doesn't do dangerous things. Comes socialism, where you're free of the responsibility of your actions, and your premiums are now you're insulated from them going up if you have a risky lifestyle. If you smoke, drink, eat too much fast food, don't exercise, whatever, you pay the same as me, right? Because there's no way to audit you down and saying whether you are a larger risk for the person who's insuring you.
So, yes, I would say that we're already paying for people's, riskier decisions. I think that it's more of an impact on the system. Like I said, health concerns don't. I just blanked on the word. They don't discriminate against who has a medical condition.
But a lot of it is. A lot of the stuff you're paying for are things that bad life choices are contributing to healthcare costs, and it's not controlled. You're not penalized for making those bad choices.
That's something that I would say I don't have the numbers on. I would tend to believe that the numbers of bad, life decisions are dwarfed by just the everyday nature of our health, and how little control we really have over that. So I think that, again, just the bad decisions, the bad life decisions that lead to people being in our healthcare system and, kind of pulling on those resources is negligible.
I think it's the other way around. We'll disagree on this.
We'll disagree. I believe that. I guess I'll just give this anecdote. Earlier this year, I spent 2 months in the hospital from diverticulitis. I didn't even know what that was. Okay. I don't have a history of it. My family doesn't have a history of it. I woke up one day with some pain in my abdomen. A few days later, I find myself in the hospital. 2 months later, I've had 4 surgeries. I don't believe I did anything to lead into having diverticulitis. The doctors told me as such as, well, this just kind of can't happen. I think that there's a lot more people like me that wake up with just something medically that has happened. There's a lot more people that get into a car accident that's not their fault, and now they're in the hospital. I think that number, again, kind of far exceeds the number of people that are just being stupid, So, and I think that those people that are being stupid deserve care just as much as a person who had no control over the medical situation that they found themselves in. So,
but the model, like with car insurance, if you do pose a higher liability by those bad choices, right, then you pay a higher premium. Now, I agree with you that some people can't help it, and disease visits you no matter what you do. But I think more it's like an 80-20 split, where 80% of our healthcare problems are just bad life choices over a long period of time. Like if I were to get car insurance, I'm a 16-year-old kid. They know that I'm more dangerous than a 16-year-old girl or a 40-year-old driver, because that data is available to us. How many people visit the emergency room on things that a doctor can check the box next to? This was completely avoidable with a dozen different life choices, versus the ones where they did everything right and, oh shit, they're here. And I would agree with you. Those ones that couldn't help it, didn't make bad choices, those ones we all take care of as a community. But I think it's an 80-20 split. You probably are on the other side of that.
Yeah. And I think, obviously car insurance, health insurance, different. I guess, how about this? We just give everybody insurance. We give it 20 years. We look at the data, and then we can kind of, go off of that. I think car insurance has benefited from just an excess of data. When we add 20 million some Americans to that data pool, we give them healthcare access, then we can maybe look into the more finer details of who's at risk for certain things, who's not at risk, what life choices lead to what. And I also think that, that leads into a broader statement of the whole Make America Healthy Again conversation of, I absolutely think that we need to look at our food. I think that, again, having the government pick up the bill for our healthcare can kind of maybe help steer us in the right direction of changing how we operate in that space. So, I think that, yes, we just need to make our citizens healthier altogether. We're going to have some idiots that make decisions that lead them to receive care. I think that those are a rounding error in my personal belief. If I'm wrong, absolutely, I'll concede on that. But I still think that just the moral argument, at least for me, is everybody deserves the care. The idiots get it too. They get it, whatever.
All right. Well, I appreciate you coming in.
And I appreciate you having me. Absolutely.
It was totally civil. Don't you wish more of these debates were just like this
I
one
said,
right here?
this is what I'm trying to run on. I think that these conversations are vital, very vital. And I want to have more of them. So absolutely.
All right.
Appreciate
Sean
you.
Connely. Sean Connely was here today on Youngstown Studio. Thanks everybody for joining us. We'll catch you next time.
Thank you for listening to this show on Youngstown Studio. This is original Youngstown content. Feel free to share our videos and tell your friends about us. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Facebook.